We can say a thread that try for a lock, but if you do not success getting lock, then you do not try again. We can say a thread like this by using tryLock method. Namaste everyone, I am Gyan and you are watching the session 20 of Java and Web, Multithreading in Java. The tryLock method is a public and boolean method. The tryLock method is present in the lock interface and implemented by the ReentrantLock class. We know that the ReentrantLock class implements the interface lock. Therefore, the tryLock method, which was actually present in the lock interface, is implemented by the ReentrantLock class. The tryLock method is similar to lock, but thread will get the lock only if it is available. That means the thread will try to get the lock and it will get the lock if the lock is available. If the lock is not available, then the thread will not try for the lock for the second time. If the lock is available, then it returns true and the thread will have a lock. And if the lock is not available, then the method tryLock returns false and the thread does not try for it later. The tryLock method can be applied multiple times, but for one time it will try for a lock only once. So we have two Java files, mythread.java and check.java. In check.java we have the class check. In the class check we have the method main. In the method main we are creating a new object of type ReentrantLock. Then after we are creating two threads. The name of one thread is T1 and other one is T2. We are passing the same reference to the ReentrantLock object to both the threads. After that we are starting the two threads. Two threads here are created by using the class mythread. Now coming to mythread.java. The mythread.java has the class mythread which extends the class thread. The reference to the ReentrantLock passed by the method main of check.java gets stored here, this variable L. After that we are storing whatever passed by the main method of check.java into the variable L, the reference variable L of type ReentrantLock of the class mythread. Then after in the method run we are calling the tryLock method by using the reference variable L. Here in this case the thread will try to lock the object L, but the thread will try for it only once. Therefore, if the thread T1 gets a chance to execute this tryLock method, it will get the lock on the object of type L. It will get the lock, and later when the thread T2 will try to lock, then the thread T2 will not able to get the lock. So here if we assume that the thread T1 tries for the lock for the first time, then it will get the lock. Then the thread T1 will execute this for loop, and for each iteration the thread T1 will sleep for half seconds, means 500 milliseconds. In between, when the thread T2 try to get the lock, then the thread T2 will not able to get the lock and the thread T2 will never try for the lock for the second time. Therefore, even after the thread T1 calls the unlock method, the thread T2 is not going to try for the lock for the second time. That's how the thread which get the first time to execute the tryLock method, that thread will only able to execute this loop. The second thread will not execute this loop. For the second thread, this else method will execute and it will print the name of the thread cannot get the lock. Because for the second thread, the tryLock method will return false and the second thread will never try again to get the lock. So let's execute this code practically. Open check.java and this is the same code as we have seen. Open mythread.java and this is the same code as we have seen. Try to compile these two codes, Java C, check.java, mythread.java. Compiles fine, now run it. Java check. It runs fine and as you can see the output, T1 cannot get the lock. The lock taken by the T2 and T2 executed all the iterations of the for loop. T1 has tried for the lock after T2. Therefore, the tryLock method for the thread T1 returns false and the thread T1 never tried for it for the second time. The tryLock method for the thread T1 returns false and the else block executed for the thread T1. We have another signature for the tryLock method. The tryLock method accepts two arguments, one of type long and other argument of type time unit. What is time unit? We will see in a while. This tryLock method throws interrupted exception, which is a checked exception. That's why while using this tryLock method, you should be ready to handle this interrupted exception. The tryLock method is a lock interface method implemented by the ReentrantLock class, similar to previous one. Caller thread gets lock immediately if it is available. But if the lock is not available, then the thread will wait for at most time unit. Means if the time unit is millisecond and here the value of time is 1000, then the caller thread will wait for 1000 milliseconds. We will understand the time unit in details in a while. If lock is still not available, then the thread give up acquiring the lock. Means after waiting for this much time unit, if the lock is still not available, then the thread will give up acquiring the lock. It can also be applied multiple times. Means this method can be applied for the multiple times. Time unit is an enumeration present in the package java.util.concurrent package. This is the enumeration time unit having various values: nanoseconds, microseconds, milliseconds, seconds, etc. So here we can use it like this. If l.trylock 1000 time unit dot milliseconds, that means the thread which is trying to get the lock will wait for at most 1000 milliseconds. If we use here time unit dot days, then the thread which is trying to get the lock will wait for at most 1000 days. Let's open check.java, and this is the same code as we have seen. Now open mythread.java and look at this code now. We have imported the ReentrantLock and we also have imported the time unit enumeration from the package java.util.concurrent. In the class mythread, the class mythread extends the class thread, and we are assigning the value of the ReentrantLock passed by the method main of the class check to the variable L of class mythread. Therefore, the two threads are going to use the same ReentrantLock object. In the method run, under the try block, we are having a if and else block. In the parameter of if, we are calling the tryLock method by using the reference variable L, and we are passing two arguments, 10,000 and time unit dot milliseconds. Means if a thread try to get the lock and the lock is not available, then that thread will wait for the lock for at most 10,000 milliseconds. And whoever is going to get this lock for the first time, that thread is not going to block this lock for 10 seconds, means for 10,000 milliseconds. Before the 10,000 milliseconds, the first thread will unlock this lock. Therefore, the second thread will get a chance to get the lock. Let's try these two codes practically. Java C, check.java, mythread.java, compiles fine, now run it. It runs fine and executing as expected. The thread T1 got a chance for the second time, but the thread T1 will wait for at most 10,000 milliseconds to get the lock. And the thread T2, who got the chance for the first time, that releases the lock before 10,000 milliseconds. Let's try here something else. Open mythread.java and instead of write here milliseconds, write here nanoseconds. Nanoseconds. Now, if a thread tries to take the lock and the lock is not available, then that thread will wait for at most 10,000 nanoseconds. Now let's execute this code. Java C, mythread.java, check.java, compiles fine. Now run it. And at this time it is showing T1 cannot get the lock because T1 waited for 10,000 nanoseconds, but the lock was not available before 10,000 nanoseconds. The T2 got the lock before T1. Open mythread.java once again and let me just decrease the font size. What I want is, I want here a while loop. Right here, while loop. While true. Give it a bracket and give it another bracket here. So whole code is now inside a while loop. That means the second thread which try to get a lock and is not able to get the lock, will execute this else statement. And after executing this else statement, the thread will continue in this while loop and again will try to get the lock. Let me decrease the number and make it like insignificant, 1 nanosecond. This is an insignificant number. Then after I have added this statement, means the name of the current thread, and we are printing try to get the lock. That means if the thread T2 gets the first chance to get this lock, then the thread T1 will keep on printing that T1 trying for the lock. And let me add here a break statement. So if a thread is able to get the lock, that thread should not be iterate through this while loop. That's why I have printed here break. Now let me execute this code. Java C mythread.java check.java compiles fine. Now run it. Java check, it runs fine, and at this time T2 got stuck, and finally T2 also got the chance to execute.